Another top priority on the Biden administration agenda is immigration reform. President Biden introduced legislation that features a pathway to citizenship for undocumented immigrants and issued several executive orders reversing some of the former President Donald Trump's hardline immigration policies. So for more on this, I want to bring in CBS News immigration reporter Camilo Montoya-Galvez. So Camilo, in one directive, the Biden administration is implementing a 100-day moratorium on deportations. This clearly was very important to this administration because, I mean, it was hours after he was sworn in that he pivoted to executive actions about immigration. What can you tell us about this moratorium?
Yes, good morning, Anne-Marie. This is an unprecedented move by the new Biden administration. Starting today, immigrants facing deportation will have this temporary relief from deportation as long as they were in the country before November of 2020. And there are a few exceptions, those suspected of terrorism or espionage, and those determined to be a national security risk will not qualify to be covered under this 100-day moratorium on deportations. And this freeze on deportation also is accompanied by new guidelines for ICE officers, Anne-Marie. They are now being instructed to focus on arresting and deporting those who pose a threat to national security, recent border crossers at the U.S.-Mexico border, and those migrants who are convicted of certain crimes here in the U.S. So this is a monumental shift from the immigration enforcement policy of President Trump, who in one of his first actions in office said that pretty much everyone in the U.S. who is here without legal permission was subject to arrest and deportation.
So, of course, when you make a monumental shift, some people are not going to be too happy about that. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton has actually threatened to sue the Biden administration over this moratorium. What can you tell us about that? What is upsetting him so much?
Sure. So I think this is going to be a preview of what's to come when it comes to immigration policy. I think we're going to see Texas and other Republican-led states across the country challenge many of Mr. Biden's immigration policies. The Attorney General in Texas, Ken Paxton, has already, as you mentioned, threatened to sue the administration over this 100-day moratorium because he says that the Department of Homeland Security, which is implementing this policy, did not give prior notice to Texas that they were going to implement this unprecedented policy, and he's citing an agreement which we have no idea what the text of it actually is, but he's citing an agreement that purports to require the Department of Homeland Security to give states like Texas prior notice before implementing changes to immigration policy. Also, President Biden has ordered officials to pause the building of the barrier construction along the U.S.-Mexico border. I don't know how much of an impact that's going to have because it's not like there was a lot of new wall built, but some of pre-existing structures were certainly reinforced. So what does that mean? No, as you mentioned, the Trump administration built more than 450 miles of border barriers along the U.S.-Mexico border, and as you mentioned, most of it was replacement barrier along the border. But this is still a pretty significant step taken by the Biden administration. Not only is he halting border wall construction and directing contractors to stop these projects, but he also ended, Anne-Marie, the national emergency that Mr. Trump declared in 2019 to divert millions and billions, actually, of military funds for border wall construction. So that is another significant step. The military funds are not going to be used for the time being for border wall construction.
So, you know, as we mentioned, President Biden also introduced sort of a major overhaul when it comes to Dreamers and immigration policy in general, which, you know, the thing about immigration, overhauling immigration, is that both parties agree it needs to be done. And so at least that's good. But working on the nitty-gritty has been problematic. So I'm going to put that to the side, though, and ask you, we've been, you know, periodically covering this idea of a caravan that's been working its way up to the border. And I've been wondering, well, like, what happens then when these people show up? You know, changes, though the president can sign executive actions, changes take time. So if someone shows up at the border in the next couple of weeks, what happens? Do any of these changes impact them immediately?
Sure. So the new Biden administration, on its first day in office, suspended the so-called Remain in Mexico policy, which we've talked about on the show quite often, which requires non-Mexican asylum seekers to wait in Mexico for their U.S. court hearings. However, there's still a policy in place authorized by the CDC that allows border officials to rapidly expel asylum seekers and migrants without allowing them to have a day in immigration court on the basis that if they allow these migrants to come here, the coronavirus will spread inside ICE detention centers and other communities along the border. So that policy is still in place, and most migrants, except unaccompanied children, because of a court order, are being expelled. So the Biden administration has not committed to ending that policy. And then you mentioned, obviously, the Caravan that we saw about a week ago that has been largely broken up in Guatemala. We expect more of them to form in the coming weeks, and the Biden administration is certainly paying close attention to this, but it has made a concerted effort to tell these would-be migrants that the asylum system at the U.S.-Mexico border still lacks the infrastructure to review all of these asylum claims, that they need time to prepare the system. And they've also made a point of stressing that this immigration overhaul that you mentioned that was sent to Congress would not benefit newcomers. It would not benefit new migrants. It would benefit immigrants who have been living here prior to January of 2021.
And Camilo, before I let you go, very quickly, it seemed like, there's the Biden administration's being sworn in, and oh my gosh, there's a caravan on the way. Just very quickly, these caravans kind of come all the time. This is not a caravan that was put together specifically because Biden was going to become the president.
Yes, you've seen Republicans say that the Biden administration's immigration policies or their campaign pledges have fueled these caravans. But to be honest, it's largely due to the country conditions in the Northern Triangle, Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. Country conditions like violence and poverty that have plagued many areas in these countries for years and decades, and that prompt migrants to take this journey to the U.S.-Mexico border. So those conditions have not changed, and that's why the Biden administration has said that it wants to take a regional approach to this unauthorized migration by investing in these countries and making sure that these people have some economic opportunity in their home countries and that violence and crime is reduced so people don't feel like they have to be forced to leave their countries with their families just to have a better life and a safe life.
Right. Great. Camilo, thank you so much.